Hello, hello, and welcome. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We are excited to get started, but before we do, I want to draw everyone's attention to the handout section. You will see there today that you will find a copy of the slides, which is very important that you do download, and I will get to the reason why that's important in a few minutes. And then you'll also see a brochure for our HR services trainings. These are customized trainings based on the state that you're in, or just as a US employer if you don't have a specific state that has specific requirements. So we just wanted to make sure everyone had that information before we got started. So as always, I do like to start by introducing myself. My name is Adina Glincher, and I am the Senior HR Services Advisor here at PayEntry. Of course, I am not an attorney, so this training does not constitute legal advice. If you have questions for your legal team, we do ask that you reach out to them directly. But for any questions about the content of the training, please make sure to reach out to us. You can do so via hrservices@payentry.com. That will go to our HR specialist, and we will do our best to answer all your questions. And if you need some in-depth help with your HR as a business, then absolutely reach out and we can walk you through our HR services packages as well. And then any questions about the content of the training today, you can also feel free to type them into your questions box, and then I will receive those, and hopefully we'll have some time for a Q&A at the end. So why are we here today? Today we are going to be discussing harassment prevention training, and we're not going to train everyone here on harassment prevention. We're going to talk about what harassment prevention training is, why you should require it in your business, who is actually required to offer it, specific state requirements, policy requirements, best practices for preventing harassment, and then, like I mentioned, we will end with a Q&A if time permits. So we want to start with a poll. We always like to know our audience. So we want to know, are you currently offering harassment prevention training in your workplace? So you will see on the screen in front of you, I'm hoping it's working. Yep, looks like it's working. Go ahead and let us know. Are you offering it? Are you considering it? If you are offering it, is it through a third party, or are you doing it yourself? Maybe you're just not doing it, you're considering it, or maybe you have no idea what harassment prevention training is, and if that's the case, that's okay too. All right. Looks like we have a few more people chiming in. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. Oh. Sorry about that. I was having some technical difficulties. Okay, so it looks like, yes, some of you offer it yourself, which is great. Some people use a third-party provider, and some people are considering offering it. So we have a good variety of people on our call today. Thank you for participating. All righty. So first, we're going to cover what is harassment prevention training. Harassment prevention training is a process of teaching employees how to recognize and react to any harassment that happens to affect anybody. Maybe it doesn't affect them directly, maybe it affects a peer, etc. It's often used as part of a company's process to keep harassment out of the workplace by communicating and educating employees on harassment. Why should you require harassment prevention training? Harassment prevention training is one of the key ways to protect your employees and everyone in your workplace from harassment, because of course you're going to be educating them. It helps employees understand what sexual harassment is and how it will be handled if it does occur. It minimizes the liability associated with sexual harassment. So I'm going to pause on that one because I think that is generally, in our experience, what our clients hear, and they're like, tell me more. So if you have a harassment incident in your workplace and you have an outside investigation occur, or an internal investigation occur, and it is determined that harassment did occur, and you have yet to educate your employees on harassment, or harassment prevention, I should say, that is going to be a big red flag. So regardless of if you're in a state or a locality that requires this training, it is absolutely recommended, as it may mitigate your risk and show that you are educating your workforce on how to prevent this. And then, of course, it is required by many states and local jurisdictions, excuse me. So who is required to offer harassment prevention training? Federal law does actually not require harassment prevention training. Certain state laws do, though, such as California, Connecticut, Delaware, the District of Columbia, Illinois, Maine, New York, Virginia, and Washington. And even in states that do not have sexual harassment prevention training laws in place, training is a recommended best practice. So you can see we created a little bit of a chart here. We took a map of the United States and we made all the states that actually require the training blue. And then states that actively say they encourage the training are that dark orange. And the light orange are states that do not require the training. However, as HR professionals, we absolutely recommend you offer this training regardless of where you're at. All right, so we're going to go into another poll. We want to know where you are sitting or where your employees are sitting so we can best tailor this presentation. So we want to know, do you have employees in any of the following states? Select all that apply. And you'll see I coupled them together just for space reasons. So go ahead and mark which states you have employees in. All righty, I'm going to give it just another minute. And we're going to go over the state requirements, or at least some of those requirements for the states that you all have employees in. So it is important that you participate so we can best tailor this presentation. All righty. So it looks like you all have employees in either California and or Connecticut and New York and or Virginia. So I'm going to spend some extra time on those states. If you did not participate or you are interested in the requirements of the other states listed, please make sure that you download our handout. It is the presentation in its entirety and it includes the state requirements for all of these states. If you didn't have any in any of these states, no worries. No need to, of course, participate in the poll, but definitely still listen. It's important to hear if you're considering hiring in other states, what those requirements might be. And you'll also get a feel for what some harassment prevention trainings look like if this is something you haven't yet to offer, but you are considering doing so. All right. So we're going to go over California because I know we have quite a few people on this call who have employees in California. So this is unique to California. The state says that employers with 5 or more employees must offer harassment prevention training. This must be offered to both employees and supervisors and managers. They do have to have an extra training for those in the supervisory roles. Independent contractors, volunteers, and unpaid interns must be counted in that 5 or more number, but they do not have to receive the training. And effective January 1st, 2021, which of course is already passed, all employees must have been trained. So if you have employees in California and have yet to train them, definitely reach out to us. New employees and new supervisors must be trained within 6 months of hire or promotion. And seasonal or temporary employees must receive training within 30 calendar days after hire or within 100 hours work. And if they don't fit either of those requirements, they do not need to be trained. And then temporary agencies should be providing the training, not necessarily the client who hires the temporary agency, but make sure you do reach out to the temp agency to make sure that is occurring. And then I'm just going to leave this slide up here for a few minutes. This goes over the content of the training. So you will see a lot of similarities between all the different states that require it. Some of the common items are the supervisor's obligations to report sexual harassment, discrimination, and retaliation, resources for victims. So many of the states actually require that you provide the state-specific regulatory agency that employee can complain to if they need to. The employer's anti-harassment policy is a common one. And definition of abusive conduct is also common. I will say the last one is pretty unique to California. California requires that information on harassment based on gender identity, gender expression, and sexual orientation also be provided. All right, and if I'm going too quickly for you, you wanted to read through all of those bullets, definitely download our handout and you can read through that on your own time. So California continued. California employers must train their employees every 2 years. And for record keeping, an employer must keep documentation of the training for a minimum of 2 years. And that documentation must include the name of the employees trained, the date of the training, a sign-in sheet. So if you are going to offer this training, it's important that you fulfill these requirements for record keeping reasons, a copy of all certificates of attendance or completion, the type of training, copy of all written or recorded material. So there are some handouts that are legally required, and then the name of the training provider or the person who did the training. Other requirements include the fact that supervisors need to be trained for 2 hours. All non-supervisory employees need to be trained for 1. The training must be done in a classroom setting with an in-person trainer or use another method that is interactive and effective. So that may include a webinar or an e-learning where your employees have the opportunity to ask questions. And the training must be conducted by a trainer or educator with expertise in the prevention of harassment, discrimination, and retaliation. So that's why we did that first poll. We wanted to know if you're currently offering it, are you the one doing the training? And if so, you may very well qualify to do the training under one of these 3 bullets. But if you don't qualify to do it and you're doing it anyway, you may want to reach out to our team so we can go over our offerings when it comes to harassment prevention training. All righty. Next, we're going to touch on Connecticut. So in Connecticut, employers with 3 or more employees are required to offer this training. If you have fewer than 3 employees, you must provide training, but only to supervisors. So that's the biggest difference there. And then employers must provide the training to pre-existing employees and supervisors by May 20th of 2021. Once again, if you haven't already done so, reach out to our team. New employees within 6 months of their hire date, which aligns exactly with California, and new supervisors within 6 months of their promotion or supervisory role if they have not already received the training. And then content, you can see here a lot of similarities between this California slide and the Connecticut slide. So you definitely need to define what sexual harassment is, discuss the types of conduct that may constitute unlawful sexual harassment, talk about the penalties that may occur, and then harassment prevention strategies in your workplace as well. All righty. In Delaware, I'm just going to touch on a couple of these bullets for the sake of time. Employers with 50 or more employees must offer harassment prevention training in Delaware, and employers must provide additional interactive training to supervisors. So some states don't even touch on supervisor requirements, and some states have separate requirements. So if you're in a state that was not listed on that poll, so California, Connecticut, Delaware, District of Columbia, Illinois, Maine, New York, Virginia, or Washington, but you're in one of the states that actually recommends training, it's still important that you reach out, because if your state recommends it, then they often have criteria you need to follow if you offer it. So very similar to vacation policies that way. You don't legally need to offer vacation, but if you're going to, there are generally state requirements to follow. So if you are in a state that was not in that poll, still reach out if you have questions regarding your state requirements. And the content you'll see here is very, very similar to the other states, except that you need to provide directions on how to contact the Delaware Department of Labor, because of course that would be unique to Delaware. All right, District of Columbia, you only need to offer this training if you have tipped employees. So that's a fun fact. There's no number threshold. It's just if you have tipped employees. And then we touch on the requirements here, which include District of Columbia regulatory bodies. And then the in-person training must be received within 90 days of hire, so a little bit quicker there. All right, in Illinois, all employers with employees working in Illinois need to provide the training. There's no employee count threshold, and all bars and restaurants must offer additional supplemental harassment prevention training, and new hires must be trained as soon as possible. We like those vague terms, right? In the content, you will see mirrors the other states to some degree. And in Illinois, harassment prevention training actually needs to be done annually. So that is also why it's important to check your state requirements, as the frequency may change depending on the state your employees are in. We're going to move on to Maine and quickly go over this one as well. In Maine, employers with 15 or more employees must provide harassment prevention training, and they need to be provided to all new employees within 1 year of employment. So they give you a little bit longer in Maine. And then there are additional requirements for supervisory employees as well. And once again, content is pretty standard. So for the supervisory employees in Maine, the content must include the specific responsibilities of those employees and actions that supervisory employees must take to ensure immediate and appropriate corrective action in addressing sexual harassment complaints. And the record-keeping requirements do differ as well. All right, we're going to spend a little bit more time on New York and Virginia because it sounds like you all have some employees in those states. So in New York, all employers must provide harassment prevention training. All employees working on any portion of their time in New York must be trained as soon as possible. And employees, including exempt, non-exempt, part-time, seasonal, and temporary workers, also must be trained. The content in New York includes an explanation of sexual harassment consistent with the guidance issued by the New York regulatory bodies, examples of unlawful harassment, information concerning federal and New York statutes on sexual harassment and remedies available to victims, and information concerning employees' rights in all available forums for adjudicating complaints. Excuse me. And then in New York, this must be done annually based on either calendar year, anniversary date, or any other date the employer decides. Of course, you want to be consistent. And for record-keeping purposes, employers are encouraged to keep a signed training acknowledgement and copy of the training records. Other requirements include the fact that the training also must be interactive in New York. So examples include a web-based training, in-person, or live training. And there is no requirement that the trainer be certified, unlike California. Trainers may appear in person, by phone, or video conference. In Virginia, so in Virginia, public contractors with a government contract of over $10,000 and 5 or more employees must be trained. And all employees performing services in Virginia, except for those who are required to complete harassment training provided by the all employees, are required to have this training aside from that criteria. And the content says that you need to include the sexual harassment policy and you need to provide this training annually. And we will just quickly go over Washington as well. So in Washington, coverage includes every hotel, motel, retail, security, guard entity, or property service contractor with 1 or more employees, including all managers, supervisors, and employees. And it's only required once. All right. So the 13 states with training recommendations include Colorado, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, if you have 50 or more employees, in Vermont. Those states encourage employers to conduct harassment prevention training for new employees and supervisors within 1 year of hiring or promotion and suggest minimum requirements. So if you have employees in those states, then it is important that you provide the training because it is recommended and that you follow those requirements. In Iowa, Oregon, Texas, and Wisconsin, recommended employers provide some form of harassment training. And then in Hawaii, Ohio, Oklahoma, Maryland, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia, the guidance is very similar to the EEOC, which is that they recommend that employers develop appropriate trainings to inform employees of their rights to raise complaints, how to raise them, and develop methods to sensitize all concerned. So we list a bunch of states on this slide. That's because in addition to harassment prevention training, some states require policy. So harassment prevention policies. So you can see the list on the left are all the states that, despite training requirements, require that you have a policy in place to prevent harassment. And then the states listed on the right are recommend policies. So if you need help creating a harassment prevention policy, or you want our team to review the one you have in place or provide you with the template, reach out to us, and we're happy to talk about the different offerings through our HR services department. All right, and a comprehensive harassment prevention policy includes the following list. So a statement that the policy applies to all employees, applicants, clients, customers, vendors, etc. Examples of prohibited conduct, a description of the organization's complaint system and where and how to access it, a statement that the employer will provide prompt, impartial, and a thorough investigation, which is very important, assurance that the organization will take immediate and proportionate corrective action, written and communicated in a clear, easy to understand style and format. I can't tell you how many policies I have read that even our HR professionals have a really hard time understanding it. So it's important that employees can understand what they're reading. It must be translated in all languages commonly used by employees, provided to employees upon hire and during harassment trainings, and periodically reviewed and updated. And we are coming up at the end of the year. So if you want a second set of eyes on your harassment prevention policy, or if you need one in place, definitely reach out to us. Now is the time to update it when you work on your handbook and you provide your employees with those new policies. So some best practices for preventing harassment. So the EEOC actually conducted a study on harassment in the workplace, and they provided a report that identified 5 core principles that have generally proven effective in preventing and addressing harassment. So those 5 principles include committed and engaged leadership, consistent and demonstrated accountability, strong and comprehensive harassment policies, trusted and accessible complaint procedures, and regular interactive training tailored to the audience and the organization. So for those of you who don't know, our HR services packages actually include an e-learning system or a learning management system that provides state-specific harassment prevention training that is compliant. So that's included in our service. If you want our team to do a live harassment prevention training via an online platform such as Zoom or maybe GoToWebinar to your team and even incorporate your harassment prevention policy in it and talk through maybe some situations you've been dealing with, then that is what that handout would be a great resource for you to check out. Those are our prices for those individual live trainings. If you are an HR services client and you're on one of our packages, you get 25% off those trainings, so keep that in mind. And of course, we are here to help you. We don't just like to throw information at you, we want to assist you. Our HR professionals can help update and or create employee handbooks and company policies, including sexual harassment policies, provide compliant harassment training to your employees and managers, keep up with changing state and federal laws, and assist with day-to-day HR best practices, forms, policies, and more. And that last paragraph covers that e-learning/learning management system that I just spoke about. So next webinar will be in 2 weeks from Thursday, which I believe is going to be October 13th. Can't believe we're in October already. And we will be going over employee classification. So definitely join us for that webinar. And if you have any questions about updating your handbook or your harassment prevention training policy or just the training itself, definitely reach out to our team. All right, I'm going to check the question box real quick before I let everyone go. All right, the only question I see here is, did you cover Florida? And we did not. Florida was not on our list of states that require harassment prevention training. So we will double check that for you, and we will shoot you an email directly if we maybe misread that list to make sure you're getting the information you need for your state. All right, well, thank you everybody so much for joining us today. If you have any questions that you did not get the chance to ask, please feel free to email us at hrservices@payentry.com, and we are here to support you with all your HR needs. Have a wonderful rest of your day.